Hello, and welcome to the next episode of the Live Your Spa Life show. Spa life is a lifestyle that accepts that accomplishment and harmony coexist. The spa and spa life, the SPA, is for seek power always. That power within you to do your bigger work in the world. I am so thrilled to invite our next guest, which is Jess Tomlinson. She is a guide for women entrepreneurs who have learned all the systems and strategies, yet are feeling disconnected from themselves. And I love this, want to feel like a kid on Christmas morning, just reinvigorating their life and business once again. With over 10 years of branding and marketing in award-winning media and travel companies, she brings her skills as well as her intuition to her clients to release the shoulds, we all know about those, right? The shoulds in business, and instead become the true embodiment of themselves, evolving into, and I love this, Radiant Entrepreneurs, which is Radiantpreneurs combined together. So I love that. Jess, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Diane. It's such a beautiful opening. So I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Oh, absolutely. And, you have shared the stage, with Byron Katie. You've really been in top empowered women, NPR. I mean, really had a lot of exposure around in this message. And I'd love for you to touch on, we really talk about how we consciously create our life versus living by default and really designing that. And I know you have really created some tools to support you in that. And I love if you could talk a little bit more about the releasing of the shoulds.
Yes. Oh my goodness. Well, I think like many women, men, of course, have their own struggles, and some of them might struggle with plenty of shoulds as well. But we live in such a culture that places certain expectations on women, right? And growing up, I know I received my approval and love from my family through doing it all and being it all. And so my biggest lessons when I started to really walk the spiritual path and also find my way in the entrepreneurial space, in the coaching space, was that there was no way that I was going to be able to, I don't believe in balance, but live really this dance of taking care of myself and doing my work in the world if I had all of these shoulds. And I might be able to do it, but it wasn't going to feel good and I was going to burn out. And so I feel really grateful that early on I realized that I needed to really do this work around letting go of any of the shoulds that I had, whether it was from media or society or my friends or my family, partners, romantic partners that I had, and really pay attention to what I needed and to learn the necessary skills, which can be scary, as I'm sure your audience knows, to be able to speak up and get my needs met in a way that allowed me to thrive in my business and my life. And it hasn't been an easy path, but it's really been the most rewarding journey to go down, because it has allowed me to be able to shine brighter and step on bigger stages and land interviews on NPR alongside Byron Katie and, speak in a stadium in New Zealand. I wouldn't have been able to do all of the things that I've done without really tuning in, taking time for myself and seeking that power within versus getting it from other people.
Right. Well, I think this is a great opportunity for us to just kind of take a deep breath in with our audience of just let that really sink in, how many of, listeners, I really love you to just, if you're driving, pull over for a moment here and give yourself a moment to really let this sink in. We've had this conversation before, and I think it's important to go deeper into it, to really look at what are the shoulds that are happening, whether that we put them on ourselves or the reflection of people around us. And this is such a powerful conversation about, we look so much outside of ourselves. I'm actually going to be doing a talk around this about, even in myself, in my life, the things I've looked outside of myself, and what are we doing to look within ourselves to come from that place as we're stepping into our life and doing what we're doing. And, I'd love to hear a little bit more about how you've kind of walked that dance, right? Or how you've moved through some of that. And when there is the external pressure to perform and to, it should look a certain way, but when it doesn't align with who we are and who we're being, how do you bridge that in business? Because I can already hear some of the mindset of some of the ladies going, well, how do you do that? That sounds great in theory, and I'm sure she can do it, but my life is crazy, right? And so how is it that you pull the crazy out of it and you are more intentional in how you're living?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. There's so many great things that you said in there. And I love that you said, not performing, because one of my messages that I care really deeply about is for women entrepreneurs and women in general to stop performing and start expressing. And what I mean by expressing is self-expression. I really teach my clients how to use self-expression as a strategy. And what that means, what that automatically helps us do is to come from an aligned place, because the reality is that all of us are uniquely expressive beings. Like for me, my self-expression, depending on the moment and what I'm feeling and what I'm really jazzed about and the work that I do, is going to be different than yours, Diane, right? Even if we're talking about the same subject.
Totally.
And so one of the really amazing tools that, it's a funny story because I didn't even realize that I was doing this, but I had a photo shoot several years ago with some amazing photographers here in the Bay Area called In Her Image. A lot of like women coaches are photographed by them who are well known in the coaching space. And I intuitively picked my outfits. I've always been pretty good at being on camera and performing. And I come from a background of dance and theater and getting up on stages. My earliest time speaking on a microphone was I was in student body leadership in high school. So I was like, what, even before I could drive, I think I was on the mic leading groups in the auditorium in high schools. Right. And so I can get up and I can perform. And yet what I realized is that I was really denying certain parts of myself when I got up in front of audiences. And later on down the road, this happened to be the case, whether I was having my photo taken or I was on video. One of the passions that I have is teaching women entrepreneurs how to authentically be on camera, because my partner is actually a videographer. So we do brand videos together. We support women entrepreneurs and all entrepreneurs actually in getting on camera and really aligning with their most authentic self-expression versus performing. Because what I realized is that while I was really good and I always got compliments of wow, you're really great on camera, I noticed that sometimes after I would get off of my, performance stage, I would feel wait a minute, that wasn't really me. And I would feel like a little upset, that I had kind of fit into what I thought I was supposed to be in front of people delivering the message. I'm sure you can relate to this, right? We all kind of go through this on this entrepreneurial path of what's going to resonate most and what's going to get the most, engagement, and how am I going to mesmerize these people and show that I'm an expert. And so what happens, and what happened for me, my biggest fear especially, was that I was really afraid that people wouldn't see me as smart. Because growing up, I'd always kind of got the oh, dumb blonde comments randomly from people, right? And they would just view my playfulness and assume that I didn't have the smarts as well. And so I was really afraid that people would only see that. And so I would posture when I would step up to speak in front of audiences or on camera. Right. And the cool thing is that I noticed that when I did this photo shoot within her image, I intuitively picked these 3 outfits that after I'd done the photo shoot, I'm looking at these photos and I'm like, oh my gosh, these outfits that I chose are these 3 different archetypes inside of me, inside of all women, that are uniquely expressed in different ways. And it was such a cool realization, because this was years ago and I still use it in my work today. And it's the most powerful thing for women entrepreneurs to think into and understand about themselves. And those 3 archetypes are the playful child, which is that essence, that self-expression within all of us that wants to have fun, that can see the possibilities and that is a little bit lighter and makes things easier. Because from a business standpoint, the reality is, and this is what people don't understand, right? When we're looking at the practical application of these archetypes, it's like, well, I'm afraid to be too playful because I'm worried that people will think I'm not smart enough, or that I'm, like flaky, or whatever kind of like, stereotypes around fun, not an expert. But the reality is that if you are not fun and you're not able to show people the possibilities and bring the energy behind the work that you do, people aren't going to want to work with you, because people do things that feel fun.
Right.
Right? Like
I love that you're diving deep into this, because I'm fascinated with this conversation. I've recently just did some self-exploration and really looked at the difference between being visible versus being seen. And it's an interesting distinction, because, we can all be visible, right? I'm here on my show. I do lives. There's all the different things that we do where we're visible in the world. But I also, and I think it's a carryover from my work when I worked with the police department and I worked undercover, is that I believe we have our public life and we have our private life. But I think we all also have an undercover life. It's that part like, if I let people see this part of me, how am I going to be judged? What's the perception going to be? What does that even look like? Right. Yeah. And I get what you're saying. I've had, similar things like, you look great, but what's the substance, what's behind it? People don't know I have a master's, it's like all the different, our experience. We all have this experience in our life that brings us into who we are and how we show up. And so it's so important to embrace all of these different aspects. And I love how you mentioned about the childlike, we have all these different aspects. I love to hear what the other two are.
Yeah, of course. And I love that point, by the way, about being visible versus being seen. I actually did an event, a couple of workshops here during the summertime called Seen. So funny that synchronicity just came up. So the other two archetypes, the second one is the Radiant Rebel. And this archetype is fierce. She's bold. She stands up for her needs. She says the hard thing and really stands in the voicing of truths. And so this is a part of us that we oftentimes shy away from, because we're worried that we're going to offend somebody. We're worried that we're going to outshine someone. We're worried that we're going to seem narcissistic or egotistical. But the reality is that people are inspired when you take a stand for yourself. So talking about like your credibility and why you really care and why you're passionate about the work that you do, talking about yourself is a service to the people that you serve, because then they can really see you as an example of a bold leader that stands for something. And if you're not standing for something, then you're probably not standing for much, right?
Right.
And so this is a really big one that I help a lot of really big-hearted entrepreneurs, and especially people that are more spiritual. They're really afraid because they want to come from the heart all the time. And my advice to them is always, this is coming from the heart. Your heart wants to speak the truth and wants to be an activator. So, this part has probably been the most life-changing for me, is really owning my Radiant Rebel. And I have a really cool story of that's actually how I got on NPR. Was I did a video where I was talking about a subject that not that many people wanted to talk about. And I called it my beef with woo-woo. I don't like that term. I bridge the gap between, like science, and I'm super spiritual, but I think we do ourselves a disservice when we even use that term, because the very people who are using it are actually demeaning their work. We just need to own that, this is the work we do and these are the results we get. And they found me on YouTube when I posted that video years ago. And just so happens I got to be interviewed as the expert alongside Byron Katie.
That is fantastic. I love that. And I love that you're bringing the fierce, because I am such a proponent of women being fierce and feminine, that we are all of these different aspects. It's not one or the other. And I'm not sure if you're familiar with Roger Love, but he's like the #1 voice coach in America. And he's done all kinds of talents, anywhere from, Michael Jackson to recently both Lady Gaga and Bradley Cooper in A Star Is Born.
Yeah.
And also, with also speakers as well, Tony Robbins. There's a very, wide range of people that he's worked with about their voice and how your voice lands and what that looks like. And one of the things that reminds me of that in this conversation is that a lot of times we don't realize the impact of our voice, right? And I know one of the things I am in the process of really looking at with my voice is I tend to talk fast, right? And so learning to slow down, having the impact that to have, let those words land, have some space. But one of the things he talked about is when women were trying to, quote, fit into the workplace, they were talking really low and being like a man in the workplace and getting really like that. However, he said, you want to have an edge to your voice where it is the lower version of you becomes the feminine, fierce version of you, so that you come across with that edge where you're grounded in your conversation, you come across more confidently. And when you actually shift and change your voice, it actually changes the experience, not only of yourself, but how it lands for other people. And they've got a lot of studies around how that has helped bridge the gap with men and women working together, with women feeling more confident just by shifting their voice into their true authentic voice of who they are. So I love the fierceness of where that brings that in for us. And so, I'm really being active about just really my breathing and how I'm coming across and just, being aware of how much impact we have. And we've got that extra layer as a female to have all the different ranges of that, to connect emotionally, to come from a confident place. And it's such a beautiful thing when we bring all of these different archetypes together.
It really is. It so is. It's our full range of self-expression. And that's what people, if we talk about leadership, that's what they're craving from us. They just want to see us. And so that is a gift in and of itself, for you to really be seen both by yourself through doing this kind of inner examination, letting go of whatever shoulds are holding you back from showing these pieces of yourself, and a gift to your community, your clients, your audience, whatever kind of work you do in the world. It's just a gift to even show all those diverse dynamic sides of who you are, because it gives others permission to do the same.
Right. Well, I know they're going to be asking us about what the third archetype is.
Yes, they totally are. And you actually already mentioned it, which is the sexy feminine. So yeah, the sexy feminine. This one tends to be the most confusing. I get a lot of questions, a lot of people that struggle with even the word sexy. And I've had requests from people for me to change it to sensual. And I'm like, screw that. This is a dynamic piece of our healing as a woman, because sexy and feminine, it means something different for each person. And that's really my goal. Like sexy means something different to me than it means to you, Diane, than it means to whoever's listening. And so my invitation is to really define what this means for you. And the core essence of this archetype is really the heart connection. It is the vulnerability. It is the softness, the sensualness. It's the ability to nourish ourselves as women, to set very healthy boundaries so that we get our needs met, to really be present with people. And that can be really uncomfortable sometimes, especially if we're used to, like I have been, earning my worth through achievement and doing and go, go, go.
Right.
So this is really a beautiful, deep archetype. And I've had so many gifts come into my life in the way that I do life and business through exploring this archetype of how do I follow more of what feels delicious to me, and how do I honor more of my natural cycle as a woman in the way that I'm doing business, even from the way that I've shifted how I welcome people into my programs to, how I have sales calls. And there's all sorts of different ways that we can really tune into this archetype. So I like to think of her as kind of like the goddess, the mama energy. But again, it's kind of unique to everybody because it's so deep.
Right. Well, and I love that you're unapologetic about using the term sexy, right? Because it's meant to trigger someone. It's meant for you to go inside and say, what is that for you? Like we are all of it, right? And if we shut down one part of ourselves because someone might be uncomfortable with it, right? We all have different expressions of what that is. I mean, when we look at, sexual energy, it's creative energy. I mean, if we're doing our work in the world, we have to tap into that energy. It has to be part of who we are and how we show up. And I believe that's part of what makes us magnetic as women, is that creative energy of holding that energy of sexiness. And it can be as, overt or subdued as you decide to play with it, depending on your circumstances and who you're with and what that looks like. And it doesn't necessarily have to be physical, right? It could be who we choose to be with ourselves and how we show up. And so I love that you're bringing this into the equation because it's important, for women to own all aspects of themselves. And I think too, that when we shut that part of ourselves down, that really comes into play with the next thing I'd love for us to chat about is visibility. Is when we shut those part of ourselves down, it's in a way of not allowing ourselves to be seen and not be fully seen. And we only show maybe part of ourselves because we might feel judged at the other part. And so I'd love for you to talk about just the visibility piece and how you're using this in your life and also with your clients.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you for asking. This is something that is such a hot topic. And I think it will be forever because just we are human beings doing business and life, right? And there's multiple different reasons why we might hide our visibility and truly allowing ourselves to be seen. And that comes back to the work that I do around like letting go of shoulds. And it can be everything from, your family dynamics to just how you've identified who you are in the world. And one thing that I want to point out specifically, because it just came up with a VIP client of mine, we were doing her VIP day and she's been in business for several years and she's putting a lot of pressure on herself to be visible in what that's supposed to look like. And the way that she's actually hiding is by staying plain. So like not really adorning herself by, not wearing earrings, not really putting on any makeup or doing her hair. And that's totally cool. That is fine. If you feel that is how you are authentically aligned and you shine in that way, right? But she's actually using it to hide.
Right.
And
all that hiding in plain sight.
Yes. And then there's the opposite, right? So she's like a healer and she doesn't want to outshine people. And so that's her way of hiding. There's the opposite. You can also hide by through your clothes, right? Yeah. By shining like big and pay attention to me and I want attention. And I have been both of those for sure, and I think we all have it. Yeah, if we're really honest and we take a look at like ourselves and how we show up sometimes. So what is important to me is really finding, and for me in my own business, this comes back to taking it day by day and really being aligned with myself in the moment, in the season that I'm in, and what feels really authentic to me. So sometimes it can hold us back from doing a Facebook Live because we don't have any makeup on, but just do it, right? Just do it and really own and maybe even speak to the fact that you're not wearing any makeup and why, because you're a real human being and you're doing
Girl,
life.
I've done one from the bathtub, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it was pretty controversial, but it was just really getting outside of myself. And what's funny is I think it's important, especially as entrepreneurs, to play with the edges of ourself and what that looks like. And someone who maybe was just scrolling through and saw, hey, here's this woman in a bathtub. I was actually talking about serial killers and I was talking about my cases. So the juxtaposition of what we are talking about with what is seen, there's so much in the levels and the depth of who we are and what we bring about that when people get to see a different version of ourselves, it brings out that another level of being seen.
Yes, it does. It does. And really owning the things that might feel, I love the visibility edges. Like this is a silly example, but I feel called to share it. A new client of mine, she was saying, Jess, I really love how you just like bring wine to your Facebook lives and you just own that like you drink. And I'm like, yeah, I drink. Like I drink wine. I like wine. And she's like, a lot of people are really don't want to talk about that. And I was like, oh, interesting. So she actually told me that was one of the reasons that she really, like, not the main reason, obviously, but it was just one of those little visibility pieces that she resonated with me and what she considered to be a way of being visible and being brave and maybe being in that, like, radiant rebel energy. That she was like, all right, cool. Like she gave herself permission to do that. I want to learn how to do that more.
Right.
So
yeah. No, I love that. It's so important. And, as we're having this conversation of standing in our power, along that journey, there are times that we give our power away or that we feel disempowered. I'd love for you to share, an incident of where you felt disempowered.
Yes. Oh my goodness. Well, I have a really specific example, and it's fairly new that I've shared. I really had to tap into my vulnerability, my sexy feminine archetype to share this story because it's something that really deeply impacted me in my work. But I had an experience a few years ago where I was in a group of women, and it was a mentorship situation, and we were doing an exercise around our too muchness. And I brought up the fact that, I still sometimes struggle with I'm too playful. And I really worry what people think about that and if they take me seriously. And what happened in that situation was really traumatic. I actually got reflections back confirming that I was too playful and that, I had just shared this really vulnerable truth and I didn't receive support. And what I learned in that situation, because it was really, really hard for me, and it definitely felt like I just literally handed over my power and I was like, here, take it all. And it was the first time that I felt like I went back to my room that night. I felt like I hated myself. And I'd never felt that depth of like, it is not safe who I am. I'm horrible. I am not like, a powerful woman and like I'm a horrible human being. It was really scary. And I had given my power away in that circle and felt like I wasn't enough. And I really had this big traumatic experience. Yeah, it's taken me 2 years to process, honestly, which is why I just not that long ago shared about it on Facebook, because now what I learned from that is that I really take a stand for supporting other women, all women and my clients, of course, and really owning all pieces of themselves, especially the pieces that they feel like are too much. Right. And that when we do that for ourselves and we have support, like that's when we take our power back.
Right.
And that's when we can really, really do the work that we are meant to do here. So it's twofold. It's internal power, but it's also the support of other women entrepreneurs or, whatever kind of community that you're in.
Yeah. I love, you being on the other side of this now to be able to see like the lessons and growth from this. Cause when we have these, and especially when they feel so raw, especially when we're truly being ourselves, it feels like such a personal attack, but really this is just the affirmation of the kind of support we need. Right. And, I think most people are doing the best they can. Right. And they maybe thought that they were really trying to support you in moving through that. So we get that people mean well, right? Yeah. But how it lands for ourselves and in our own growth and how we can utilize that, it's so important. This is where it is great to be in community and in a community that actually you're heard on all the levels of where you're at, right? We're all at different places in our business and people can really, one of the things I love the distinction in mentorship of, we all have that power within us. The mentor is just activating, bringing that out of where you are. And I love the distinction in that because it doesn't make you wrong where you're at or what's happening. It's just that expression. And we should be able to express all the different aspects. And when you are able to express, let's say, the playful part of it, it allows other people to be playful. It allows them to give themselves permission to be in that place. And, when did business and life become so serious where we didn't actually embrace all the different aspects of ourselves? So I think it's so important to really look at that. And especially as entrepreneurs, to be able to show, the listeners that this is part of the path, right? There are going to be disempowering moments. They're going to be our biggest growth. They're going to be helping us move through these situations. And I know you also have situations where you've been fully in your power, and I'd love for you to share that as well.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. So many moments of disempowerment. I mean, I could write a book on them, and so many moments of feeling in my power. And the one that is coming to mind right now that I feel called to share is a moment that I could have been very much out of my power and very validated in being out of my power, because I had just learned that I had lost my second dearest friend from childhood. She died at the age of 33. And just 3 months prior to that, I had lost my best friend, and I'd been with her when she passed, also 33.
I'm so
and
sorry.
Yeah, thank you. And I was in New Zealand the day that I learned that, the day after I learned that my second friend had died. I had just landed, and I was with a group of about 40 other entrepreneurs, and we were getting ready to do talks in a rugby stadium for the community. And I'm like, oh my God, I cannot go on stage. Like I am literally in so much grief right now from, my first friend, and then now just learning that my second friend had died. And my talk was actually all about the lessons I learned from my best friend who had just passed.
Wow.
So it was just like,
timing.
Yes, like how am I going to get on stage and talk about this and not crumble, right?
Yeah.
And I had to make a decision, because I very easily could have just been like, no way. Like, I'm not getting on stage. I'm going to fall apart. And it was high stakes because it was the biggest group I'd ever spoken in front of. We're in a freaking stadium, right? And I was no newbie to public speaking. I had produced, 3 TEDxWomen events and multiple public speaking engagements throughout my career. And yet this was the biggest moment. And here I was in my most fragile state.
Right. How perfect.
Yeah. And what I had to learn in that moment, what I did learn was what I'd been preparing for and what I've been helping my clients with, and knowing how powerful it is, especially since that moment, which is showing up exactly as you are, not trying to make it different, not trying to make it something that I'm not able to authentically access in that moment. And yet at the same time, digging deep for the power that is within me to share my message and why it matters even more right now because of what I'm going through.
Right. That's so powerful.
Yeah. And so for me, I can still feel what I felt like in my body, shaking on that stage and holding the microphone and just speaking about my friend and using it as really my own medicine, but as a transmission to whatever message the audience needed to hear as well, coming through me because I was in so much grief. Yeah. And when I watch that talk, I definitely see a part of myself that, that doesn't always come out. And so it's really special to kind of, know that no matter what I'm going through, I can still show up authentically and have it feel good for me and have it be powerful.
Right. This is such an important message, for our listeners who are listening here right now. I mean, there's sometimes the pressure, and a lot of times it's the internal pressure to be perfect and to have all the right words and have it come across well. And, and having your own show where it's sometimes you just have to go with what's in front of you, and you just have that more of that, hey, whatever's supposed to happen happens. Right. Mm-hmm. And I think that the more we embrace that we actually are bringing life in ourselves into, letting people see we're a real person and we're showing up with all the different flavors of ourselves. I think it's so much more impactful that we actually do show up how we are in the moment. This is what it is. This is what it looks like. And it gives each of us permission for that, right? And then there's a deeper message that gets passed through in that beingness and in being there with that. So I so appreciate that share, and for you to be able just to do it anyway, right? It's feel that fear and do it anyway and have it move through that. And with that, I believe that our environments are so important in reflecting how we live our life and what that looks like. And so one of the questions I love to ask my guests is, we feel differently in our bedroom versus our kitchen versus our office. And what is your favorite room in your home and why?
I love this. This is awesome because this is something I've been struggling with lately, actually. And I've been having to really create an environment that feels good to me because I live in, one of the highest places. I don't like to say the word expensive, I'm against it, but like highest places to live as
Right.
far as like rent is concerned, highest cost of living in Northern California. And I live in this gorgeous, humongous house. I'm in the pool room right now. We have an indoor pool. It's a 5-acre property with avocado trees and lemon trees and orange and like mandarin. And it's just like, I call it the Garden of Eden. It's this beautiful place. And yet I've really been struggling because there's quite a few of us that live here. And I'm used to, I had a 10-year life in Las Vegas before I was prompted by a flood to move here, and I lived by myself. And so I'm really learning how to create this environment for myself. And what I've been noticing is that really, in order to have the peaceful sanctuary that I really need to do the work that I do, whether it's like creating content or videos or, social media posts, I need to have a beautiful space. And so my room is my little sanctuary. And I normally have a really hard time working in my like same area that I sleep in, but it's the most peaceful in the house since we have other people moving around and everybody's entrepreneurs. And so what I've been doing lately is just intentionally buying candles, buying flowers to put near my desk, making sure that I have like music if it feels suitable to, a creativity that I'm trying to, come up with content, and really just like beautify. Like I just bought new sheets. So I know that's not really related to like, doing work, but
it makes a big difference.
Yeah. And they're like silky. And so it's like the little things really that matter to me that I'm noticing. And I've got to have like an organized clean room too. So I guess I would invite all of the listeners to really just, what is that one little thing that could up the quality of how you feel in your workspace? Because it really does make a difference, even when we don't think it does.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. Well, I know, Jess, you and I could talk all afternoon, and I know that our listeners are going to want to stay in connection with you. And I know you also have a free gift. So I'd love for you to share that and how they can stay in contact with you.
Sure. Thank you so much. And thank you everybody for listening. And I'm really grateful to have this time with you, Diane, to share my message and also hopefully inspire at least one aha with whoever is listening. And my gift to you is I have created a 30-page free guide where I go over the 4 phases to becoming the truest embodiment of you as a radiant feminine entrepreneur. And so these 4 phases are the phases that I take all of my clients through, whether we're doing group work or private work. And so you'll learn about those phases, and then you'll also learn more about the archetypes. And I have an exercise that you can do to get in touch with the 3 archetypes within you, and then action steps of how you can integrate those even more in your life and business. And you can grab that guide over at jessicatomlinson.com/guide and download it for free. And then the best way to stay in contact with me is I'm really loving Instagram lately. I'm having fun with Instagram stories. So you can find me. My handle is Radiantpreneur.
Nice. I love that. And we'll have all of the links in the show notes. So for those of you driving, you can check that out after and have that happen. So I just want to thank you so much for your wisdom and, sharing all the different sides of yourself here. It's so important to show that and how women can stand in their power. And I love the stand that you're taking for women in the world. So I just want to thank you for that.
Thank you so much, Diane. I really appreciate you. Thank you.
You got it. And to our listeners, the resource that you have the limited amount of is your time. And we so appreciate the time that you've taken to be here with us and to share this time. And, it's so important to be in community and to support each other. And so if you know of a sister that needs to hear this message, please share it. Please subscribe and get the word out on that. And it's just mentioned, what is the aha? What's the thing that you took away from this? Whatever platform you are listening to this on or watching this on, put in the comments, what is that? Or, what's your favorite archetype, right? Or which one are you standing expanding into today? Which one are you going to try on? Something maybe even different. We just would love to hear about your journey and where you're at, and make sure that you tag both Jess and I in there, because we want to continue the conversation. We want to answer any questions that you have and really just lift each other up. I mean, this is how we really take our stand and stand in our power, is in community and being together. So I want to thank you all for your time together. Again, we'll put in the show notes the links to stay connected to Jess and her free gift. I'll also have the link in there for my Life Reset Guide, which is liferesetquiz.com, which will also be in the notes. So you'll be able to have that in there, because knowing where you're at really helps you move forward in your life. So until we connect again, live your spa life. Bye for now.